participants, so many students, faculty members over here. My greetings to all of them. So basically my talk today will be on metal oxide gas sensors, and this will be a more focused session. Instead of telling you about what I have done, I'll be more focusing on how to do it. So that's my talk. I'll be sharing my screen in next few seconds. Hope the slides are visible.
Yes, they are visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything is
So,
okay. You are audible and slides are visible. Yeah,
okay. So thank you so much once again. So today's talk is regarding metal oxide gas sensors. I will discuss why and how. So these two are very important for any research. It's like nowadays, many faculties are applying for projects. I got some projects to review also. But there I see these projects don't think about why we are doing this. They have some background on something, they are applying the project, but they are not thinking of a use case. So this is very important to define a use case first. Basically, why we are doing this work, why this is important, and where this is being applied. Then how this will be done. Basically the methodology of the project, methodology of the work. So these two are very important part of the problem definition. So before I start, I'll share this very interesting quote, which is very relevant for today's talk. If you can't measure it, you cannot improve it. Basically means what? If you cannot measure means if you cannot sense it. If you cannot sense any problem, if you cannot quantify any problem, it is very difficult to improve. For example, you talk about air pollution nowadays. You talk about manhole gases at this point of time. Now, if you cannot measure those pollution levels, you cannot improve the situation. Same is the case with others, like in your healthcare. In healthcare, if you cannot diagnose the disease, you cannot improve it, you cannot cure it. So that's a very famous quote. In the field of sensors, I feel it very relevant because if you cannot sense, if you cannot quantify anything, any parameter, you cannot give a proper corrective action based on that. So that's why this is a very relevant quote for this talk. Now, for today's presentation, I'll be covering sensors. What are the basic of sensors? What are different sensor parameters we should take care, and what are the different parameters we should measure to quantify the sensor performance. Then I'll talk about the MEMS technology, a brief about the MEMS technology. These sensors are fabricated nowadays. MEMS is very famous term in terms of sensor fabrication. Then I will focus on metal oxide gas sensors. Then where are the opportunities for all of us, where we can use these metal oxide gas sensors, and what are the applications. So if you start with sensor is a technological device that detects or senses a signal, physical condition or chemical condition, into an electrical signal. Basically, these are 5 senses. You can see it may be sight, hearing, all these are 5 senses. If you talk about these senses, so, these are 5 senses. So you are getting one form of input and you are getting some signal to brain. So one signal is going to your brain. So that's why it's called a sensor. You are some signal you are getting as input. That's most of the time physical or chemical input or optical input, and then you are getting an electrical signal to your brain. So that's why these are called sensors. So these are some example of sensors. Now you must have heard about a term which is transducers. Now what is the difference between sensors and transducers? So transducers in general converts one form of energy to another form of energy, whereas sensors converts one form of energy to electrical energy. So basically sensors are subset of transducers. So just to make, I just wanted to make it clear before I proceed. If you see the market, so sensors market, if you see, it's increasing day by day, so increasing exponentially. And if you see the Asia Pacific, China is the biggest exporter of these sensors. Now, if you see, India is very is user and no, we are not exporting any sensors. We are not making sensors. So that's a very kind of grim situation for us, but we are using a lot of sensors. So if we take up this area, so there are so many advantages, so many opportunities for us. If we take few examples, these are the few examples of sensors. There may be thermometers, thermocouple, phototransistors, microphones. These are different examples. So very simple example is thermometer that takes your temperature, that's a physical condition, and converts into an electrical signal, maybe out voltage, and that voltage is again calibrated to temperatures. Then comes the thermocouple, phototransistor, microphone. All these are examples of the sensors. Now, another term is actuator. Now, in transducers is a combination of sensor and actuator, what I would say. So, actuators are basically, they take electrical input and gives you physical or mechanical output. So, basically, combination of sensors and actuators is called transducers. Now we need to understand some basic important parameters which needs to quantify, which needs to assess the performance of a sensor. These are sensitivity, or we can say sometimes as response. So this is basically slope of the characteristic curve. So on x-axis you have input, on y-axis you have output. So slope of this characteristic curve is called the sensitivity. But in some cases where you take only change in y direction with respect to the initial value and take the percentage, this is called response. So sensitivity and response, these are two correlated terms and most of the times used interchangeably. Then second point is accuracy or precision. So in accuracy, if you see this first example, so I have taken 4 examples. In first case, you see all the measurements are close to each other and are also close to the actual value. So means values are close to actual, measured values are close to actual value, means they are accurate and they are precise because they are all lying in the same, in the close vicinity. If you see the second example, they are close to each other but they are very away from the actual value. So these are not accurate but very precise. If you take the third example, there the average of all the measurements is close to actual value. So this is accurate, but they are not close to each other. That's why it's not precise. On the other hand, if you take the fourth case, the values are not accurate and neither precise because they are not close to the actual value. Also, they are not close to each other. So they are not making a closed group. More other parameters are error. Error is basically, you all know this. This is basically the difference between measured value and the actual value. Linearity. This is an important parameter. Linearity. If you talk about the characteristic curve, your curve may not be linear all the time. So there is always a non-linearity. If I see actually how it would look like, it would look like something like this. So it won't be a straight line. There is some curve. So this curvature with respect to the endpoint linear line, the difference between these values is plotted, and the maximum value between of the difference is called non-linearity. So non-linearity should be as low as possible. This is very important to understand. Then comes the response time. So if you take a typical characteristic curve, response time is the time taken to reach 90% of the saturation value after a situation is triggered. And similarly, the recovery time is the 90% of the baseline once the recovery is taking place. Now, all these sensors, if we talk about these sensors, a very important technology, I would say, is MEMS, micro electromechanical systems, using which all these sensors are fabricated. So micro electromechanical systems is made of 4 words, or I would say rather 3 words: micro, electromechanical. So micro, because these are small in size and they perform electrical as well as mechanical actions. So that's why it's micro electromechanical systems, which is sometimes called as micro machines or microsystem technologies in different areas. So just to give you a reference, if you take the example of human hair is somewhere around here, 100 microns. And if you take the example of virus is somewhere around 100 nanometers. So as we are suffering from coronavirus nowadays, the size of the coronavirus is somewhere around 125 nanometers, the average size. So this so small object is like we are suffering from so small object. We are not able to see it properly. You cannot see it with normal microscope. You need electronic microscope or electron microscope for that. So we are we are suffering with this disease. So just to give you an example, what is the size of these things which are dealing with now in daily basis? And if you see where the MEMS lies in this area, 100 nanometers to 1 mm. So this is the area where we say we are working in the MEMS. So where are the applications? So we make different sensors using MEMS, microelectromechanical system technology. So very first example of MEMS is the inkjet printer micro nozzle. So if you see, there are two actuators and a microfluidic channel where the inks are filled, and if you apply pressure on both sides, the droplets come out. So that's how the printing works. Once the electrical signal is given to the nozzle, the ink will come out and it will be printed on the paper. Next is the DMD, digital micromirror devices, where the light is reflected based on the requirement. If you see the usage of DMDs are in projectors, light is reflected on the desired basis. Then comes the example of accelerometers. So all must be knowing accelerometer has very good application in airbags. When car suddenly stops, the acceleration comes suddenly to zero, then the airbags are deployed or any impact is taken place. So in both the cases, the airbags deploy. So another example is gyroscope. All must have seen in your mobile phones, there is a sensor which gives you, which automatically senses the position of the phone, whether it's portrait mode or landscape mode. And accordingly, it changes the screen orientation. So that's basically because of the gyroscope. Another sensor is MEMS pressure sensor. So nowadays in very high-end cars, the tire pressure monitoring systems are embedded, and the pressure sensors are deployed on the wheels, and you can see the values of pressure online. This is one other application of this. Another application is CMUT, capacitive micro machine ultrasonic transducer. This is ultrasonic transducer. Basically, it sends the ultrasonic waves, and the reflected waves are received by the same kind of device, and the difference is measured, and that tells us about the quality of the structure. So that's why I have written non-destructive testing. So non-destructively, you can test any structure. For example, bridges, buildings, these type of structures can be monitored. So what are the advantages of MEMS sensors? Because these are small in size, and low power in consumption, we can make multiple devices on the same wafer. This is a typical wafer you see over here, and this is the typical size of sensors. So if you see on this point, the size is very small. And how this is done? So this is very important. Now, all things starts with sand. From sand to silicon, silicon to sensors. And how this sand is converted into silicon? There is a typical process called growth of silicon wafers. So there are different categories. One is CZ growth, and float zone methods are there. So there are different methods for making sand to silicon. So if you see this process, so you take sand, convert into metallurgical grade silicon, then from silicon it's converted into molten state. Molten states are mostly polycrystalline silicon, and polycrystalline silicon is annealed at a very high temperature so that it converted to single crystal silicon, and then it comes into a cylindrical form that's called ingot. From ingot, it is sliced to get wafers. So this is the typical process from sand to silicon. You get a silicon wafer, and on silicon wafer, a disk of silicon, you make all the sensors, which is, if you see, this is one sensor in this particular wafer. All these are same sensors, and you are making so many sensors on a single wafer. If you see what are the typical processing steps in semiconductor fabrication, so just remember these three processes. One is deposition, another is patterning and etching. So deposition, you deposit something on the wafer. Whenever I talk about the process, everything we are doing is on wafer. So first is deposition, then comes the patterning. You are making the desired pattern, or I would say simplified terms, you are making circuits. You are making circuits on wafer. Then you remove the unwanted material, that's called etching. So these are the three important parameters, three important processes: deposition, patterning, and etching. Just have to remember these things. So if you just want to, who are not aware with the fabrication facility, they can visualize a simple PCB. So PCB is converted into circuits by help of, first they deposit a copper layer on top of it. So first is deposition, then they pattern the circuit on top of the copper, and then they etch the unwanted copper. So these are the similar kind of processes are taken into semiconductor fabrication. And there are some specific processes called chemical mechanical planarization, ion implantation, diffusion. We'll talk about these sometime later. So the important parameters are process are deposition, patterning, and etching. Now we have the basic idea about these sensors. What are sensors? What are different parameters related to sensors, and how they are fabricated? They are basically fabricated using MEMS technology. I will now talk about metal oxide gas sensors. What are these metal oxide gas sensors? So before I go further into metal oxide gas sensors, let's have a look at the. There are some news from the literature I've taken. So there have been so many incidences in past which could have been avoided if the proper gas sensors were used. So this shows what is the importance of gas sensors in present time. So a gas sensor is a device that can detect a specific gas, and even if the gas concentration is very small, and give us an electrical signal or give us an optical signal in terms of LED, or give us a sound signal in terms of buzzer or something, that's called a gas sensor. So why I have made this dog cartoon over here? Because dog nose is the best possible gas sensor available by nature. So because they have 10 times more receptors than human nose, that's why they are considered as the best gas sensors in the world. Now another is this bird. So what is the significance of putting this bird picture over here? This is the picture of canary bird. So in olden days, in mines, people used to send these birds into the mines, and if the bird keeps singing or making noise, or if it comes back safely, that means the going into mine is safe. Otherwise, they don't send people into the mines. So that's basically old gas sensor, I would say, old gas sensor in the time of 60s or 50s, I would say. So people used to use this as gas sensor in that time. Now, this is, I told you one application which is in mines. There are other applications of gas sensors, like in process control industries. There are some processes where some byproducts as gas are emitted. So if you can monitor the amount of those gases, you can tell the quality of that process, if the process is completed good or not, if you measure the byproducts quantity. Another is environmental monitoring. So nowadays, before Corona, I won't say now, before Corona, there was huge concern of air pollution in Delhi, in Bombay, like most of the areas. It was very polluted. So if you see this gases I have mentioned, CO, CO2, CH4, NOx, SOx, these are the gases which are very important to measure if you want to know the environmental quality. And based on that, you estimate the air quality index. So if the air quality index is not good, you need to take corrective actions. And another application is fire detection. So in fire, there are different components which can be detected. Number one is smoke, particle counts, and the CO2 gases. Then alcohol detection in drink and drive cases. The police can use this type of systems and already using this. Detection of harmful gases in mines. I already told you it has application in mines. Home safety, LPG, CO. CO is called silent killer. Like most of the times when there is deficiency of oxygen and something is burning, so that creates CO in the environment. So that's a silent killer because it doesn't have a smell and it can kill people. Now, before I proceed further, I'd like to tell you what are the different technologies used for gas sensor. How many different how many different ways to measure the gases. So first is resistive gas sensor, where we measure the change in resistance. Another is capacitive gas sensor. A dielectric constant is changed, so capacitance is changed. Acoustic gas sensor, where the resonant frequency is changing. So you must have heard about SAW devices. Optical gas sensors, NDI gas sensors. So where the refractive index or absorption is changing. So these are the different technologies that are being used for gas sensor. All the technologies have their advantages and disadvantages depending on the, some has complex fabrication process, some has good selectivity, some has bad selectivity. Selectivity is basically a parameter which tells you about the how accurate your sensor is to measure that particular gas, or if it is affected by the environment, other environmental gases or not, how specific it is. Now, among these technologies, I would only talk about resistive gas sensors because the it has various advantages. So it is low cost compared to other gases. It is less complex in fabrication. The circuit making is comparatively easier compared to capacitive, acoustic, and optical sensors. So we talk about resistive sensors. In resistive sensors, if I talk, there are two main components. So one is micro heater and another is sensing part. So I'll talk about them separately also. So sensing part is where the gas is coming on the surface, then gas is making some reaction with the surface, and based on that some electrical signal or some resistance change is generated, and that resistance change is recorded by the electronics. What is the use of micro heater then? So this is a typical structure. You have substrate, you have micro heaters, you have a passivation layer, you have electrodes to measure the resistance of the film. So this is, just keep this in mind while I move further. Now, why micro heater? Because as soon as gas adsorbs on the surface, there is a reaction taking place. Now, this reaction may be oxidizing reaction, or it may be a reducing reaction. If it is an oxidizing reaction, electron loss will take place. That means material will lose electrons. So that means resistance will increase. If it is a reducing reaction, the material will gain electrons and the resistance will decrease. So there are two reactions taking place. Now, these reactions will take place only when the sufficient temperature is provided. So that particular reaction temperature is provided by the microheaters. If we go deep, more deep into the material, all of these materials are having grains. These are two grains, like I would say 1, 2. And the boundaries, the intersection points of these grains are called grain boundaries. And the adsorption of gases is most of the times happen on the grain boundaries. Now, if an electron want to go from here to here or from here to here, so these boundaries offer resistance. Now, because of these boundaries, there is a depletion taking place, and once the oxygen gets absorbed on the surface, this is oxygen coming from the environment, is absorbing on the surface, this will take electron from the substrate. The electron will be taken out, and if the electron is taken out, the resistance, the depletion will take place. So these grains will be depleted. Now if you see from here to here, there will be no electrons. So this will behave as an insulating layer. So this is called depletion. So if electron wants to go from here to here, it will see a lot of resistance, and hence once, for example, this is the initial resistance, and as soon as oxygen comes in, the resistance will increase and saturate. And further, if some reducing gas comes on the surface, what will happen? The electron will be released back to the substrate and to the material, and this depletion will go away and this barrier will go down. So basically this is the barrier which is taking place. In presence of oxygen, this barrier height will go high, and in terms of reducing gas, this barrier height will be reduced. so that the electron movement will be easier. Now in case of reducing gas, the electron movement will be easier. That means the resistance will go now down. That's the typical process of gas engine. Now, ambient has oxygen present. So this oxygen gas gets absorbed on the surface at some temperature. Now, based on the temperature value, there is the charge transfer taking place. Now, depending on the temperature, charge transfer will decide what are the ions on the surface. So if it is less than 100 degree, so O2 minus will be available on the surface. If it is 100 to 300, O minus will be available on the surface, and if it is greater than 300, O2 minus will be available on the surface. So now you can you can have an idea which ions, oxygen ions, are available on the surface, and you can predict the gas sensing behavior further. Now, you know the basic concept of gas sensing now. You have the basic idea about sensor parameters. Now you need to see what are the different specifications you need to design your sensor. What are the different parameters you need to freeze before you go ahead into the design simulation and fabrication. So I have divided this into 3 categories. First is electrical category, physical category, and third is sensor category. Basically sensing parameters. So in electrical, you need to know at what voltage you are going to operate your device, at what current it will be handling, what is the maximum resistance, what should be the initial resistance if this is the maximum resistance, what should be the physical parameters, basically what should be the line width. So if I like I talked about micro heater, so micro heater I'll be talking about. So micro heater is basically a resistor. It's a coil of most of the time used as platinum. Now, what should be the line width of that platinum? What should be the total length of that coil? And what should be the thickness? Because these 3 parameters will tell you what should be the resistance. Because you are starting with the resistance, so you need to freeze your physical parameters. Then only you will be able to know what is the resistance you are going to achieve. Then you need to know what is the target concentration for which you are going to use your sensor. So these are very important parameters. You need to categorize your sensor into these 3 categories: electrical, physical, and sensing categories. And based on that, you should design your sensor. Once you have frozen your specifications, you need to understand using simulations how this is behaving, and then go for the fabrication. So if I talk about the first component, which is micro heater in the gas sensor, so this is basically a resistor. So you must be knowing every heater is a resistor basically. Any material which offers resistance to electrical input can be used as micro heater, as a heater, because the electrical energy will be dissipated in terms of heat. Now the second important parameter for micro heater is geometry. Now you need to understand what is the initial resistance of your heater, what is the material you are using, what are the geometries you are going to use. So if you see the geometries, these are some typical geometries people are using in research, and which I have been using in my work. So double spiral, S shape, and fan shape. So what is the importance of these geometries? So you need to have uniform thickness, because your sensing layer is going to be on top of this area, only sensing on the heated area. Now, if you don't have uniformity in the temperature, every place on the sensing film will not be used as sensor. So if you have low temperature at a particular area, that part won't be used as sensor. So you need to have temperature uniformity across the heater. So that's why geometry is important. So you need to choose such a geometry which can offer you a good uniformity. Next important point is material. Which material you need to use. Now, before you freeze your material, you need to consider resistivity of the material. Resistivity should be high, because only a resistive metal will offer you heating characteristics. Then availability of the material, cost of the material, is it physically or chemically stable? Those parameters of the material you need to consider. And if you consider all these parameters, there are a few choices. Like first is platinum, nichrome, tungsten. These are the most possible, like best possible choices for microheater. Now, if I talk about them one by one, tungsten is very good material, but it is difficult to deposit most of the times. Another is nichrome. Nichrome is a very good material, but it gets oxidized at high temperatures. So it won't be a very stable material. Another is platinum. Platinum is a noble material and it's very stable at higher temperatures. And the sputtering of the platinum is also not very difficult. It's easier. So platinum can be a very good choice. Although it's not cost effective, but when you make devices on wafer, you must have seen that you can make multiple devices on the wafer. You can make multiple devices. So once you do mass production, cost won't be a very big issue in this particular case. Now, if the another point is geometry of the microheater. So double spiral, as far as is considered, is kind of most promising geometry. So it can give you very good uniformity, as well as it's easier to. It's not very complex. If I see the fan shape, it also gives you uniform temperature, but it's very complex. So most of the time patterning becomes difficult. So this is very good. In literature, you would see most of the people have used circular kind of the geometries also. These are also very good because if you see the contour of temperature, these are most of the time circular. So you can move a step ahead and make circular kind of geometries. So this is then you have decided your material, availability of considering the resistivity, availability and cost of the material, geometry is decided. Then you go for simulation. Are you achieving the same desired temperature or not by the parameters you have taken? So if you see, the temperature is only in the active area. This is the active area. Rest area is not heated. So that's what you wanted. So this you have confirmed using simulations. Now, this is basic of what you are. Why this heat is why this electrical energy is converting into heat energy is basically because of the Joule heating. Joule principle you must have heard. So this is the electrical energy you are applying, and this is converting into thermal energy. So now your temperature achieved after you apply some electrical energy depends on these losses: conduction losses, convection losses, and radiation losses. Now, if you talk about the temperature used for gas sensing application are most of the times in the range of 100 to 300 or 350, I would say. For this particular range, you don't need to consider the radiation losses because radiation losses are only effective when the temperatures are very high. So these are not of very concern. Now, if you are talking about micro heaters, micro domains, convection losses are again of not very importance because the heat exchange with the air won't be very effective over here, but the consideration should always be taken. Now comes the very important part, which is the conduction losses. The most losses are due to the conduction losses. Now, how to avoid these losses? What you do, like this is your substrate, and on top of yours, this is substrate. On substrate, you have patterned your microheater. This is your microheater. And if you remove the material from the back side, what you will do, you will remove the thermal mass. You will reduce the thermal mass. You are removing the material from the back, so thermal mass is being reduced. And if the thermal mass is reduced, if you see the equation, if the mass is reduced, you can get more temperature for the given heat, given electrical energy. Now, if you see the difference, this is a simulation. Two cases are taken. This is the first case where you have not removed the material from the back, and if you see, the temperature is spread out across the chip, and also the maximum temperature is only going up to 31 degrees centigrade approximately. And if you see the other case where you have removed the silicon from the back, now you see over here the temperature is going up to 585 degrees centigrade. So you can see the advantage of now. In both the cases, we are applying same voltages. So input power is same for both the cases. But you see the difference. Here you are getting only 31 degrees centigrade, but over here you are getting close to 600 degrees centigrade. So this is the advantage of removing material from the back. I will also share the practical results of this in the later part. Another important part of this is the cavity to active area ratio. Now you see this cavity. This is cavity in the back side, and if you see, this is the kind of active area on the front side. Now what should be the ratio? If you see these two features, two images, this is the cavity area and this is the active area. And here the active area is smaller and cavity area is bigger. Here the active area is bigger, cavity is small. Now you need to choose your cavity area such that you get the maximum temperature for a given power. We have simulated different cavity to active area ratios and found like 1.5, approximately 1.5 to 2 is a good ratio where you can get a very good temperature for a given power. That means your cavity area should be 1.5 times larger than the active area at least. And if you go beyond 2, the mechanical issues will take place and your membrane will be very fragile and it can break. So there is a trade-off between the mechanical stability and the power consumption. So 1.5 to 2 is a very good good range for the cavity to active area ratio. Now, if you see this thing, this is the fabricated micro heater. So this is the micro heater. As I was talking about, this is the active area. This is the active area and this is the cavity area. So we have taken 1.5 times cavity area compared to active area. So that's giving me a very good temperature. What we are trying to show over here is, so this is the thickness of silicon left at the back. So we are making a cavity. So I'm drawing a cross-sectional view. So we are making a cavity like this. And we are trying to remove silicon from the back. So let's say this is the membrane thickness. This is the membrane. Now we are trying to vary this membrane and trying to observe what is the temperature we are getting at different powers. Now when we have 9 micron silicon left on the back side of micro heater, you see the temperature for 200 milliwatt or about, let's say 100 milliwatt is only close to 50 to 100, only 100. So for 9 micron, 6 micron, 3 micron, you will say only 100 degree temperature is achieved. But if you remove complete silicon from the back and only oxide is remaining, only oxide membrane is remaining, you see a very huge change in temperature. And at a given power, almost 600 degrees centigrade you are able to achieve. So that's the advantage of removing silicon from the back and reducing the thermal mass. Now another part is, I told you earlier, is the sensing area, sensing component. In sensing, we have interdigital electrodes and sensing field. So interdigital electrodes are important, and we need to optimize the number of fingers as well as the gap between fingers. The gap between fingers is also important, because if you see the cross section, these are the fingers on the substrate, and on top of that you will have sensing field. So more number of fingers you have, more curves you will get on the sensing film. That means more surface area you will get on the sensing film. That means you will get more sensing. So if you increase the number of fingers, you will get more sensing. So now more fingers will make it complex for you. So complexity as well as high sensitivity, you need to make a trade-off between these two. Now this is the formula where you can calculate the net resistance if you have n number of fingers, and K is the coefficient approximation factor you can apply based on the practical geometries. Now the next part is the sensing film. So in sensing film, you have made your micro heater, you have put your electrodes. Now you need to put sensing film on the top. In sensing film, there are so many options. People are trying now 2D materials, 1D materials. Thin films are also being tried, and most of the times these are metal oxides. In metal oxides, most of the people are using tantalum pentoxide, tin oxide, zinc oxide, titanium oxide, tungsten oxide. These are the different metal oxides are being used. And to improve the sensitivity, people are also using noble metal additives. In sensing film, what are the important parameters? So the important parameters are, first is stoichiometry. Now, if you talk about SNO2, now this A and B, the stoichiometry of these two components is very important. This will decide your complete sensing performance. Another point is thickness. You need to understand what is the optimum thickness you should deposit so that you get the maximum sensitivity. So if you see, according to what I have observed, 100 nanometer to 150 nanometer is the best sensing thickness you should deposit. Or if you go for 2D materials, there you can deposit even lower thickness and you can get the higher response. This is for thin film. What I'm talking about is for thin film. And another important parameter is grain size. Now, why grain size are important? Because as I discussed earlier, most of the materials are made of different grains, and grains are depleted when gas gets absorbed on the surface. So this is depletion. So no charge carriers are available in this area. So if you somehow you can deplete your grain completely, you will get the maximum change in resistance. So that means if your grain size is, for example, this is D. If your grain size D is less than twice the depletion width, your complete grain will be depleted. And if your complete grain is taking part into the sensing, you will get the maximum response. Another important parameter is the resistivity of your material. Now, resistivity is important because if you have very high resistive film, you will not be able to measure the resistance. So resistivity, you should plan so that you can measure the resistance properly and get the maximum output from the sensor. Now, once you know about all the components, you have designed your micro heater, you have simulated the micro heater performance, you have characterized your material. Now it's time to integrate the material, the micro heater together so that you can make a complete gas sensor. So for that, you need to make a layout so that you can go for lithography, patterning, deposition, all that. Layout is made. This is the typical structure of gas sensor which we use in MEMS technology. So you have a substrate, silicon substrate, then you have a silicon dioxide layer, so that this metal micro heater, third is micro heater, is isolated with the silicon substrate. Then there is a passivation layer. This passivation layer is made of silicon nitride most of the time, because silicon nitride is electrically insulating and thermally offers good conductivity, so that your micro heater is able to give complete heat to the sensing film. So this film should be electrically non-conducting, but thermally it should be conducting. Then you have electrodes, and then on the top of that you have sensing film. Now, gas sensor fabrication. After that, you have micro heater fabricated, electrodes are patterned on top of that in sensing film, and finally you remove the silicon from the back so that the thermal mass is very low and you can get the maximum temperature so that the response is maximum. This is the typical flow. We make the gas sensing chip. Gas sensing chips are put on header. These are called headers, where you package your the chip, or we call it as die. The die are mounted on the header, and these are wire bonded to make these headers, these complete sensor, and these sensors are then interfaced with electronics, so that you can get the quantified value of the gases what you observe in the environment to your screen. Then once you have fabricated everything, then comes the characterization part of it. Now, what are the important characterizations you need for this particular purpose? First is you're talking about micro heater. So micro heater, you need to measure the temperature of the sensor live. To measure the temperature live, you have to use micro heater as temperature sensor also. So if you want to use that as temperature sensor, you need to remember this equation: R is equals to R naught 1 plus alpha delta T. This is a typical equation where resistance, change in resistance with respect to initial resistance is recorded if there is a change in temperature. So this is called TCR, thermal coefficient of resistance. So if you can calculate the thermal coefficient of resistance, then, and you know the initial resistance, based on the temperature change, you will be able to know the resistance. So your resistance will change as soon as the temperature is changing. So with that equation you can use to use your microheater as temperature sensor. Now you need to characterize your microheater so that you can get the values of temperature according to the power. So if you see over here at 60 milliwatt, you are able to achieve almost 400 degrees centigrade temperature. So this is very low power consumption microheater you are able to achieve. Then comes the transient response of microheater. So your microheater should heat very quickly and also cool down very quickly, so that you can change the temperature if needed. Now, if you see over here, the response time and recovery, the rise time and fall time of the microheater is 5.7 milliseconds to 6 milliseconds. So it can go up to 430 degrees centigrade from 25 degrees centigrade in 5.7 milliseconds, as well as come down from 430 degrees centigrade to 25 degrees centigrade in 6 milliseconds. So this is very fast. So your microheater is working very fast. Then you need to measure the temperature using IR thermometer. This is non-contact imaging, where you can see the temperature is only in the active area. Others, please mute your mic. It's a small request. Others, please. So this is the active area where you see the heated part, and heating is only in the active area where your sensing film is placed. If you have heating in this particular area or this particular area, your contacts will be broken. So that's why, and also your power consumption will be higher because you'll be heating the entire chip in that particular case. Now you're only heating the active areas. That's why your power consumption is small, and only your sensing film is heated, and you are getting the maximum response because of that. Then comes the characterization of your film. So in film, what you can check. You need to first check your crystallographic orientation using XRD. XRD will tell you which planes are present. Is it a single crystalline film, it's a polycrystalline film, or it's a amorphous film. In most of the cases, polycrystalline films are much better for sensing application, though these curve can tell you have a polycrystalline material or single crystalline material, and are you getting the required phase or not. Then you need to understand the AFM analysis of your film, also the FESM analysis of the film, so that you can understand the grain distribution, or you can understand about the crystallite inside the film. So once you have characterized all the parameters, or the parameters are according to your design, and your sensor is as per the requirement, then you go for actual measurement of the sensor. So actual measurements, it means you apply gas on the sensor and see the electrical response of the sensor. Now there are two methods of testing. One is static, another is dynamic. So what you do in static, so let me tell you, basically you have a chamber where your sensor is placed. So this is your sensor. This is placed inside a chamber. So inside the chamber you apply some gas, and there is the outlet also. So in case of static, you insert gas inside the chamber and block the out, and also block the inlet. So gas stays there inside the chamber, and you record the measurement of the sensor. This is static measurement. In case of dynamic measurement, you continuously feed the gas inside the chamber, and gas is continuously flushed out, and you get the measurement in real time. So this is the typical categories of the measurement. So if you see a typical sensing chamber, this may be very useful if you are working in this particular area. So you have a sensing chamber. This sensing chamber is connected with the pipelines with the MFC controller. This is mass flow controller. So in this mass flow controller, we have 4 MFCs. So these 4 MFCs are controlling the mixture of gas, and this mixture of gas is going into the chamber, and from chamber, the one pipeline is going outside the room, and then electrical connections are given to the multimeters and power supply. So you need a power supply so that you can power your micro heater to achieve a particular temperature, and then you need the emitter or multimeter so that you can measure the resistance of your sensing field. How the response will look like, I'll show you that. A typical response looks like this. So initially, when you apply only air, so you apply only air, so this is your baseline. Once you apply a gas, so in this case, resistance is going down. That means you are applying some reducing gas. So reducing gas is inserted over here, and the resistance drops down and gets saturated. And here again, you apply the air. This gas is removed and only air is applied. So recovery starts taking place, and the sensor recovers to the baseline. The baseline is recovered. Now, here you can see there are 2 times mentioned, T1 and T2. T1 is the time when you insert a gas and 90% of the saturation value is achieved. That's called the time response time. Again, when you recover your sensor to achieve the baseline, once the 90% baseline is achieved at that particular time, from the time when you remove the gas, this is called T2, the recovery time. And response of the sensor is change in resistance with respect to the initial resistance. So this is response. And if you talk about sensitivity, so that will be basically change in resistance with respect to change in ppm. That will be your sensitivity. So these are typical, some more characteristic where you see the response changes with temperature. So you change the temperature of your micro heater and see at different temperatures, you see the different response. And at a particular temperature, you are getting the maximum response. This is called your optimum temperature. Optimum temperature or operating temperature. At this temperature, you are going to operate your gas sensor. That means you will fix your micro heater at this particular temperature and will see the change in the resistance of the sensing coil. The response time and recovery time, if you see, they also changes with temperature, and as soon as you increase the temperature, response becomes faster, and also the recovery also becomes faster. Just to give an idea what is the effect of temperature on operating temperature and recovery response time and recovery time. This is a actual curve from the data I've taken from my experiments. If you see, this is sensing of ammonia, and this is the sensor resistance. I have applied 30 ppm, and if you see, as soon as this gas concentration is applied, resistance drops. Resistance drops because ammonia is reducing gas, and the electrons are given to the material. Electrons are given to the material. That means conductivity is increasing because it's an N-type semiconductor. Now, as soon till the gas is there, you see the response is the sensor resistance is going down, and when you remove the gas and only air is applied, you see recovery starts taking place and it is completely recovered. Then again, I have shown 3 different cycles just to show you the repeatability of the sensor. The sensor is quite repeatable. It is showing very good response. Now this is the response curve with different concentrations. Now if you see, there are different concentration on x-axis and the response is achieved on the y-axis. So if you take the join these 2 lines, this will be quite linear, and if you can also calculate the linearity and non-linearity of the material of the sensor. Now, we all know about the gas sensor. What is the different? What are the opportunities? What are the different parameters we should consider? How to fabricate it? But how to characterize it? Now, what are the different opportunities we have? There are opportunities in different areas. So first is air quality monitoring. I told you in the starting of my presentation, air quality monitoring is the definite area where we can explore the application of gas sensors. Different gases are required. Monitoring of different gases are required. Leak detection in various industries, as I told you earlier. CO, CH4, ammonia, different gases. Like ammonia, I can tell you in refrigeration industries to cold storage. Ammonia is used to freeze the ice, and cold storage ammonia is very much used. So it's also a hazardous gas. So monitoring of this gas is also important. Food quality assessment. It's another area where we can explore the application of gas sensors. Like I should tell you, when the fruits ripens at different stages or they get rotten, they rot, different VOCs are emitted out from those fruits or vegetables. And if you can estimate the quantity of those VOCs, you can estimate the quality of that fruit or vegetable. So this is a very good application. You must have heard like there different preservatives are being used to store the food. So you can also sense the quality of those preservatives remaining in the food. This is very important area, very interesting area. Gas sensors are also being explored in the area of disease diagnostics. How different diseases gives different VOCs in our breath. So we have around thousands of markers. We call it as biomarkers. Thousands of biomarkers in our breath. If we can diagnose these biomarkers, we can quantify these biomarkers. We can tell what disease the person is suffering from. For example, acetone is the biomarker for diabetes. So if you can tell the concentration of acetone in breath, you can tell about the diabetes in a person. For example, NOx. If you can estimate the quantity of NOx, you can estimate the health of lungs of a person. Another example is ammonia. If someone is suffering from renal failure, renal means kidney failure, so then ammonia will be present in the breath. So concentration of ammonia will increase in the breath. So these are some of the areas to give you like raise your interest in this particular area, so that you can take up this gas sensing activity and work in different areas. These are the different areas where gas sensor is important. Now to sum up, I will just tell you what are the different facilities at CSR-CIRI. CSR-CIRI, we have good clean room, we have all the fabrication facilities, lithography, etching, deposition. We have different characterization equipments. If anybody of you want any characterization on fabrication facility, you are most welcome. And with this, I thank you all for your attention and patience. And I have taken some of your lunch time also. Sorry for that. So I hope I have finished in time. So thank you once again. If you have questions, you can take the questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for wonderful presentation. Yeah, we have some questions from the participants. Let's check. The first question is Kajal Sareria.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, is there any sensor which can help us for the coronavirus detection?
Yeah, sure. So, see, this is a biomedical device. People are working on coronavirus detection. There are two different approaches. One is antigen based. I would say three: antigen based, antibody based, and one is RT-PCR based. So you must have heard about these things. So antigen is antigen antibody. I won't go into detail of these things. So you must be knowing about the immunity system. So immunity means you have antibody developed in your particular body for that particular antigen. Antigen is what causes the disease. So if you can detect the antigen, you can detect the disease. Or if you can measure the antibodies in the body, then you can tell whether you have infection or not. Another test is RT-PCR, where you amplify the virus and measure the quantity of virus itself. So these are the three different measurement techniques. So if you are in the microfabrication area, I will tell you, you can work on different sensors like electrochemical sensors. You can work on gas sensors also. People are exploring COVID detection using from breath also. So there are some VOCs which comes into breath when there is the person is suffering from COVID. So these are some tests which are done when COVID is present. Hope I have answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. There we have another question from Vikas Sakale, and he's asking that, sir, is there any sensor which can help us for the node energy efficiency wireless sensor network detection, WSN detection?
Yes, of course. So basically for this, you need to make some antenna kind of arrangement. So with RF radiation and those loads, you can measure by making the proper antenna and proper impedance matching. You can make, there are two approaches. You can either make a Faraday cage kind of arrangement where you can capture the radiation and measure into in current, or you can make RF antenna kind of patch antenna kind of structure using PCB. Simple PCB is a simple fabrication process where you can make an antenna kind of structure and make impedance matching circuitry so that you can convert that radiation into electrical signal.
Yeah, so we have another question. This is from Manisha Soiran. And then, yeah, I think this is, many of the participants may have the same kind of question. Yeah. Because they don't have the facilities at their end, and then they expect us, or like my institute also, your institute also, wherever they can find the characterization, even synthesis, fabrication facilities. So the Manisha Soiran is asking the same question. Sir, how can I characterize my sample in CSIR series? And then please give some information or whatever facility you can or what way you can help as an institute or as an independent scientist. Okay. So both you can answer the question.
So, okay. So there is a very simple procedure. You can just drop me a mail. I'll forward that mail to central facility over here. That facility will give you the quotation, and that based on that quotation, they will also give you the time slot and job can be done. It's very simplified process over here. And most of the characterization we have. Also, some people are asking about gas sensing setup. So yes, we have a gas sensing setup, and most of the gases are available with us. So, and yes, it is chargeable, but it's not like a very high cost. So the nominal costs are there, and on the basis of nominal cost, you can characterize your samples also. No problem. So just drop me a mail, but whatever characterization you want, I can help you with that.
Yeah. So we have another question from Dr. P.B. Rajeshwari. And then she's asking selectivity, as you discussed many of the characteristics of the sensors. So she's particularly taking the selectivity, and it's one major issue. Selectivity is one major issue. How to improve it for a sensor?
Absolutely, absolutely. That means Rajeshwari is working in this particular area. So it's a very good question. Selectivity is yes, absolutely a major issue. So you must be knowing that there are different methods of improving selectivity. So one way is just to go out of the metal oxide gas sensor and go for optical gas sensor. That's one way. In optical gas sensor, you can get the selectivity, but there are other issues. And if you're talking about metal oxide gas sensors, in metal oxide gas sensors, you need to add additives, noble metal additives, dopants you need to add so that a particular gas can be attracted faster compared to other gases. So that's the way you work on this selectivity. And also there are like one more suggestion I have. You can make array kind of structure. You make two gas sensors instead of one for a particular gas. So where you can check about the interfering gases and make 2 or 3 gas sensors, and based on pattern recognition, you can get the very good information. So these are the 3 ways you can deal with this activity.
Yeah, Dr. Rajeshwari, I hope Dr. Rahul very well answered your questions. So Dr. Rahul, we have another question from Santa Selva Kumari.
Yeah. Is it possible to have collaborative project with academician in biomedical area? Yes, it's very much possible. We are already working with biomedical people, and I have already worked on a project like where we detected diabetes from breath. So the biomedical experts gave me the correlation part, worked on the correlation part of it, like how acetone is correlated with the diabetes, blood glucose. They worked on that particular area, and I have made the gas sensor for acetone, and it worked very fine. We have submitted the project and also got the funds. That was successfully completed. So yeah, that's very much possible. If you are an academician in biomedical area, we are very much happy to work in collaboration.
Yes. So Shanta Selva Kumari, I hope that you can proceed now. So you have this input about the collaboration. So the next question is from SK Suresh Babu. And
yeah,
then,
I already answered this thing.
okay.
Sir, is it using of gas sensing setup and other characterization tools are chargeable for the other users? Yes, they are chargeable, but the charges are not very high. So you can write me a mail, whatever sensing you want, and I will revert back you with the quotation. No problem.
Yeah, so I want to correlate these questions. One question is about the collaboration, and another question is about the charge. So that means, is it possible to collaborate some of the faculties for these faculty members? So then, if they don't have the money or project to pay, so then they can have that kind of collaboration as well. Is it possible or not? As Siri planning. Suppose someone wanted to collaborate with you for the biomedical project or something like that. That was the previous question. So is it possible or not?
It's possible if it is a part of project. So if we are collaborating in the project, then you don't need to pay. We will work out all the characterization if we are the member in that particular project. So it's very straightforward. If you are collaborator in the project, you don't need to pay.
Okay, so I think Dr. Suresh Babu, this is the good answer for the question. Then this another question is Bhima Marapu Nagarjun, and little idea on chemical mechanical planarization, or I do not understand what is.
Yeah, this? I got the question.
Okay.
Question. So if you are asking about the chemical mechanical planarization, it's a technique which is used to planarize the surface, because in some of the cases, what you see in MEMS process, the surface gets very rough after some processing. But for another process, you need a very plain surface. So, for example, you have done a process A, and after that, you have got very rough surface. And for process B, you want very clean surface, very planar surface, very smooth surface. So, what to do about that? So, after process A and before process B, you need to go for chemical mechanical planarization, or we can call it chemical mechanical polishing. So you go for that process. What we do there, a chemical slurry is used. That slurry is deposited on the surface, and mechanical pads are rubbed on the surface so that you can achieve the smooth surface. So then you can go for process B. So this is chemical mechanical planarization. This is basically a technique which is used to smoothen the surface and reduce the roughness of the surface.
Yeah, I think Dr. Nagarjun, you got your answer for your question, and I can read some of more questions. So, Srijit is asking, is it possible that to design the sensor using polymer instead of silicon wafer?
Yeah, it's very much possible. Like in the previous talk, you must have heard about flexible electronics. Flexible electronics is all about polymers. They are already using organic substrates. So this is about substrate you are asking. So instead of using silicon as substrate, you can use PET, polymer, polyimide. These type of substrates also you can use, and these are flexible substrate and polymer substrates. These can be used, no problem. But if you're talking about the gas sensor needs a micro heater, and micro heater needs high temperature. So it can go up to 300 degrees centigrade. In that particular case, you just need to take care whether your polymer is able to withstand that temperature or not. That's all. Otherwise, you can use it, no problem.
Yeah. So in general, this means I asked the question on behalf of the participant, because as a student, we also have some kind of thinking about the facilities. Means when we are approaching to some facilities and we get some kind of impression that we are not getting the opportunity to use it. So like means, most of the time these facilities are busy. Like somebody is contacting to me also, then they are having the feeling that faculty members are not providing them on time. So what to do with this, or how to means like somebody may contact you also, and then you may say that 2 months or depending on the facilities, and then this participant or the faculty members or student, whoever contact, they get that you are discouraging them to use the facilities, and many of time it's not true. So do you have something about that?
In that particular case, I have only one suggestion. Students should look for multiple facilities. In India nowadays, there are multiple facilities available. There is facilities IIT Bombay, I have facilities IISc, facility in Siri Pilani, and facility in Siri Pilani, I can tell you, is very well planned. You will not get a 2 months kind of delay over here. It's very much systematic. Things can be done within weeks or so. But rest assured, students, rest assured, the faculties are not delaying your project. They are like, they have the intention to complete your project. They have not the intention to delay your project. So just cooperate with them. And in most of the academic institutions I have seen, there is long queue, and you need to cooperate with that. That's the only thing I can say.
Yeah. Anyway.